right, so thank you for being here, everybody. My name is Sarah Lewis, and I am with the Girl Scouts of Kentucky's Wilderness Road Council as a staff member. And today I have here with me Katie, who is a cadet Girl Scout in 7th grade, Altramese Roberts-Tompkins, and Laura Lyons. And thank all three of you for being here for our November Unstoppable Women series. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, who is going to be interviewing Altramese and Laura. And these are our women in STEM, right? You all are our STEM women. So thank you for being here, and I can't wait to hear what you all have to say today. It's okay, Katie. You can go ahead and ask your first question.
Who should I ask first?
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then maybe you can go back and forth between Miss Altramese and Miss Laura, and you can just kind of go back and forth between them.
Okay. I'm Katie. I'm a cadet in 7th grade. And I do the Teen Leadership Council for my I don't know, cluster. But I'll start with Laura Lyons with the first question. Tell us a bit about yourself and your career.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to meet you, and you're way better at interviewing in 7th grade than I was, so you're doing fine.
Definitely.
I'm president and owner of ATAC Training, and I've been with ATAC for about 30 years, but I've been in manufacturing for about 35 years. And I have a background in electrical engineering, computer science, and business, and I'm also an Army veteran.
That's interesting. And Altramese, why don't you tell us about your career and yourself?
So I'll start from the beginning, make it short. So I was born in Warren, Ohio. I moved to Holt, Michigan when I was about 10. I would consider myself to be a good listener, very determined. When I see something I want, I'll do what I can to get what I want. So I think that's kind of good attitude to kind of have, being in STEM. And I'm a thinker. I think a lot about things, and especially before I speak, I tend to think a lot. So I got my Bachelor's of Science and my Master of Science. My undergrad was at the University of Detroit Mercy. My grad was at Texas A&M University, and both degrees were in mechanical engineering. I started my career as an energy analyst in 2009 at Texas A&M with Utilities and Energy Services. And then in 2016, I started my career at Toyota. So I am currently a senior engineer, and I have been in utilities and facilities energy management, specifically looking on the data side. I love looking at data, so that's my thing. And I've been doing this for about 10 plus years. I also serve on the board for CWEL, which is the Council on Women in Energy and Environmental Leadership. And I also participate in various business partnering groups within Toyota, such as the African American Collaborative, WIT, Women Impacting and Influencing Toyota, and TCF, which is Toyota Christian Fellowship. And I'm very adamant about mentoring, and I love to give back and encourage young women to pursue careers in STEM as well.
Thank you. Laura, how did you get into your field, and why do you stay?
Okay, well, I kind of like to think of myself as an engineer at heart. I actually started out, I didn't always have the direct path. I started out because I thought the body was the most interesting machine and complicated ever. So I started out in pre-med because I really liked biology, but I found out, yeah, you chemistry I didn't like so much. So I kind of decided that I wanted to do a different path. And back in my day, we didn't even have computers, but that intrigued me. So the closest I could get to that was electrical engineering. So I transferred into that program. And then that's kind of where I got my start, basically manufacturing, because I was able to get a co-op position in a local manufacturing company, and they made packaging machines. So that was really kind of how I got my start into manufacturing. And then, when I finished my co-op and that, the economy here locally was in a downturn. So I decided that the Army was going to be how I was going to continue my education. So that was my pathway and how I figured out that I was going to get that paid for. So that's kind of how I got my start in that. And when I got out of the Army, I came back to that company. By then I had my computer science degree. And so I started working as an electrical engineer. And this company, ATEC, was starting out. It was small. And I had an opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor. And so then I kind of started with ATEC and have kind of grown. I think I lasted like all of 7 months in the engineering or R&D role, and they tapped into my business. And so I've been doing operations ever since, but it enabled me to see all aspects of a business, which was great.
That's interesting. And Altramese, how did you get into your field and why do you stay?
So 6th grade, middle school, I was about your age. They chose 2 girls to attend a Women in Science and Engineering conference, and myself and actually one of my friends who also currently is an engineer were picked to go. And so we went with our mothers, and I would say that was probably my first true exposure to engineering and seeing women in engineering and science. And I remember there was a session in a room and there was a bunch of female engineers in there. And once I stepped into that room and started hearing them give their presentations, I was like, Mom, this is what I want to do. Like, my mind was made up. So my mind has not changed since 6th grade. And I'm in engineering now. And, at a young age, because I had the opportunity to be exposed to it, I knew that's something that I wanted to go into. And similar to Laura, I did co-ops in undergrad. And I lived in Michigan. So, I co-opted in automotive. I did a couple of co-ops at GM and one at ThyssenKrupp. So my dad worked at GM, I had family that worked at GM. So I've pretty much been around, automotive manufacturing all my life. And then I kind of parted from that a little bit. And, now I came back to it at Toyota. Although I'm not specifically in the manufacturing side of things, I'm currently in environmental sustainability. So looking at the big picture now of how our company functions, I'm glad that I was able to have exposure to that. And that's why I feel it's very important to make sure that, as far as I get in life, that I always reach back and make sure that I pull others with me and, encourage young women as young as possible. I mean, I see kids in preschool already starting to get exposure to STEM. So that's how I got my start.
That's cool. I like that when you were in 6th grade that you were, that's really cool. Okay. Laura, how would you explain your STEM field to young women?
Well, and in order to break it down, first off, there's probably less than 10 people in the world that do what we do. And we make training devices basically for the transportation industry. And that would be like your automotive and your diesel vehicles. And they feature specific systems. So for instance, I think people kind of know how a wiper washer works on the car. So we kind of take that as a system and we kind of explain how it works. And then we introduce faults in that so they can understand how to troubleshoot and diagnose those problems. And our big thing was we look at, we're really good at making trainers, and we really wanted to impact how people learn electricity globally. So we have trainers on every continent except Antarctica, which there's always that.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing. Altramese, how would you explain your STEM field to young women?
Okay, so I have moved around quite a bit. And environmental is not technically my background, but that's the plus about being an engineer, because you have that foundation, you can pretty much shift into anything and be able to be successful in it. So right now in environmental sustainability, we kind of look at the big picture of how our company impacts our community and society as a whole. So we know right now climate change is a big concern and issue and a huge topic. Everybody's talking about, companies all over, whether you're automotive, energy, all companies are, concerned about climate change. So our goal in this group is to make sure that not only are we representing our company in the public light well, as far as what we are doing in our company to save energy, conserve energy, recycling waste. What are we doing as far as biodiversity, planting trees, protecting species that are almost endangered. So all those topics are, pretty much what we do in environmental sustainability. Now, remember I said that I'm really huge on the data side, and not to say that I can't spread my wings and eventually, go into some other areas. Since I am new to the group, I just joined 2020. So yeah, last year. But my goal right now is to make sure that the data that we are presenting out there to the world about our carbon, our water, and how we're saving it and how much we're saving is good information and showing our company in a good light. So that's pretty much what I do in my field currently. And like I said previously, it was mostly utilities and facilities. So I got to look at, power plants with chillers and boilers and, buildings for people comfort as far as temperatures and, domestic cold water and hot water for showering and drinking and heating and cooling. So like I said, engineering, you can start off in a very specific area, and by the time your career gets going, you could be doing something completely different. So it's one of those fields that you really have to just keep your eyes open and just be ready for whatever comes to you.
That's great. Laura, so self-care is very important, especially now. What are ways you implement self-care?
Yeah, and sometimes I think, it's not always a big thing. Sometimes it's just the little things, like maybe just taking a walk, getting out in nature. I do try to eat healthy options. I'm gluten intolerant, so I read all the labels. And, to get plenty of sleep. I usually also try to read something good. I always think putting something good in that brain before I go to bed is always a good positive thing. So those are my little things that I kind of do.
Yes, I like reading a lot, so yeah, I always. And Altramese, what are ways you implement self-care?
Very similar to Laura, actually. I try to, go on walks. It's been a little bit harder lately with me working at home, but at my job, we have trails that we can walk in on site. So we usually do that during lunch. I love reading. I haven't been able to do it as much as I did, when I was younger. But as you can see, I have plenty of books behind me that are waiting for me to pick up and start reading. So that's one of listening to music. I love music. I really enjoy doing puzzles and journaling. I love stationery. So I have a lot of journals and pens and markers. So that's a lot of stuff that I may do for self-care. Just sometimes you have to take a minute to take care of you. We're always taking care of everybody else, but I always say you're no good to anyone else if you can't take care of yourself. So
that's a good answer. Laura, where will we find you on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m.?
Well, I think in the summer I like to garden, so I might be in the garden, or I could be either doing a home project or going back and forth to the hardware store, because usually it's 2 or 3 trips, or walking my dog.
And Altramese, where would we find you on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m.?
Recuperating from the week, or I have two young kids, so on any given Saturday, we're doing something for sports or Girl Scouts or Cub Scouts. So we stay pretty busy.
That sounds familiar for soccer, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts. Yep. Laura, how do you balance your career, personal life, and passions?
Yeah, I think I always tend to think that life's kind of like a three-legged stool. You have your mental, your physical, and your spiritual aspects. And you need all three to balance, but they don't always balance all at the same time. Sometimes you might be working more on your career and you say, hey, I have to think about adding back some of the other things. So it's kind of like an ebb and flow back to the other parts of your life, but you have to have somewhat of a balance in those areas. At least that's what works for me.
Yeah. Altramese, how do you balance your career, personal life, and passions?
So I try to have priorities, and on my list there are three things. My first is faith, my second is family and friends, and then my third is career. Now that doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, but I just know when I'm getting out of control in one area, I pull myself back and say, hey, that's not my priority. I work for our future generations. That's why I work. I like to say it's not for me, it's for my kids and my kids' kids. That's why I work hard. But that doesn't matter if I don't have my family or can't spend time with them to be able to enjoy, that side of life as well. So it's about keeping in focus what your goals are and what your aspirations are in life, and making sure that you always keep, the ones that are most important to you as your top priorities. And then everything else to kind of just fall into place.
I like that. That's good. Laura, what traits might someone possess that might indicate an interest or aptitude for your STEM field?
Yeah, and I thought about, when they first started talking about STEM, and I think I see STEM in so many things. Maybe it's just the engineer in me, but like I see science, like could be biology, chemistry, physics, medical, medicine, and technology, computers, but I also see it in art and I see it in communication. And then engineering, mechanical, and of course, electrical engineering, because that's kind of in my background. And then math, and I see music as math and programming as math. So I see it in a lot of places. I just don't think we think of it in all of those areas too.
I like that. Like in music, like I really do see math in music. Like there's a lot of, yeah, those are good. That's a good answer. Altramese, what are traits someone might possess that might indicate an interest or aptitude for your STEM field?
I say someone who is a problem solver, someone who is, they always want to know how things work. I took things apart a lot and investigated things a lot when I was younger, and I would like to consider myself very analytical and logical about things and how I go about things. So they say process driven, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. We have steps in how we do things in life. And then you just have to have perseverance. Like when your challenges come, you have to knock those barriers down and just keep on moving. It's teamwork, lots of teamwork. You will have times where you work independently, but as an engineer, a lot of times you're going to be working as a part of a team. And then loving math and science and technology. If you excel in a lot in those areas in school, is definitely might indicate that you have an interest or have the aptitude to be able to be in STEM.
That's, yeah, I wouldn't know, but I agree with. I think you have a good way of proving that. Yeah. Laura, women are widely underrepresented in fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. How do you think we can increase the pipeline of women in STEM fields?
I think it really, it's always communication. It's making people more aware, and you have to keep communicating that message. And then provide a way for girls, I think, to talk to other women in careers. Like, I know I've been involved in, some of it's been like our local, just trying to get women, because I've been in manufacturing most of my life. I always felt that was a good path. With the problem solving. And I always tell them I've never been bored a day in my life. So I think they need to hear those things. I didn't have a lot of women role models, but I see where that, I was kind of like the first woman electrical engineering co-op, so I had my own way to go. But going through that, I think that would have been helpful, because then you can ask questions. Well, what about this? And so I think having the connections between those, maybe who have made a whole life career, and maybe midway, and that, because we're all at different places in our life, and they need to be able to ask all of them.
Yeah. Altramese, how do you think we can increase the pipeline of women in STEM fields?
I'm gonna go back to an answer that I said earlier, and I think just reaching out to girls at a younger age. I think by the time you get to upper middle school or junior high, if they haven't been exposed to it, not to say they won't, go into STEM, it might not, they might not feel like it's an option, or that idea hasn't been presented to them. And I think sometimes a lot of young girls aren't exposed to that type of stuff, because we may still have those stereotypes out there where some people feel like maybe that's not the place for women, or fields for women to be in. And from my perspective, not only being a female, but being a Black female, and being the only in a lot of classes, and in my co-ops where you're the only female in the room, it's even more important to me to make sure that I reach out to those young girls and let them know, hey, there's people that look like you who are doing these careers, doing them well, and they are successful. And don't let anybody tell you that you're not good enough. So
yeah, I think like reaching out is great. Just like this last 2 weeks ago, there was we went to GEMS, which is Girls in Engineering, Math, and Science, and so we did like circuits, and we did an experiment with roly-polies. And I remember like the first year we went, we extracted DNA from a strawberry, which was really fun. So like that kind of exposure, it's like it's really interesting for me to like see what kind of fields that there are in STEM, which is great.
Yeah, it's good you're getting hands-on, Katie. That's also important too. It's not just talking about it, but actually letting girls get out there, physically, do engineering and science.
Laura, what are some really cool things that people in your profession work on?
Well, I'm kind of going to go back to Altramese's with GM, because you think about designing vehicles, and Mary Barra being, the running, the business, the General Motors, and seeing that we're seeing women, go into these, and getting more into it, because I think vehicles, it's changing faster than any other industry right now, and there's so much change going on. So to me, just seeing that people try to do things, I'm really encouraged by that, and I think that would be a lot of good opportunities for other women, obviously, in the transportation industry.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Altramese, what are some really cool things that people in your profession work on?
When I think about energy, I think about you see a lot of windmill farms going up. We took a trip up to Canada a couple years ago, and as you're riding, I don't know what the highway is called, but you can, there's windmills lining like the highway for a long while. And, as an engineer and being an environmental, I'm thinking, man, that, those are generating a bunch of power, renewable energy where, we're not burning coal or anything like that. Building smarter and greener cities. People are starting to think more about making buildings more efficient from the start versus trying to retrofit them later, which is, it means we're headed in the right direction. And like Laura said, transportation. I mean, I work for Toyota, and yes, it's forever changing, constantly changing, especially with, once again, climate change being a top concern and issue. Knowing that we do have a lot of cars out there, how can we make them, be more cleaner? And even trains, buses, airplanes, every sector you can think of, people are thinking about these things. So, and then you have your fun stuff too. I mean, if just outside of what I do, I mean, you have people that design cool roller coasters, rides that you like to ride. They have Imagineers at Disney World that, come up with all these great ideas for the different things or parks they have at Disney World. So engineers get to do a lot of fun and cool things. And I'm just glad I get to be a part of that group of people.
Yeah, I never thought about like when we drive up to New Hampshire, like we see so many windmills. I never really thought about like how much power they're generating. I think I'll think about that like the next time I see Laura, how important is it to have a mentor to grow in the STEM fields? And what are some steps to build that type of relationship?
Well, I think, relationships, I always say somebody smarter than me, I always point these things out. It is important at every age to develop relationships. It could be role models, but we also need to think, the next generation. I think if we just kind of keep perpetuating that, to think, okay, what can I help for those younger than me? So we should be thinking of mentoring and growing at every age, whether in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, you're going through that, because I think that's what it's going to take as a community, just really to have an impact.
Yeah, I like that. Altramese, how important is it to have a mentor and grow in the STEM field? And what are some steps to build a relationship?
First of all, very important. And mentorship is not only about the mentor, but it's, sometimes you learn a lot from the mentee as well. I mean, the younger generations are coming in and they have a whole different world to, deal with than we may have coming up. So just bouncing off of each other, being able to, give younger, women advice, help them to achieve their goals and, their purpose and, wherever it is they want to go within their role, and help them to get there. And I think some of the important steps are, you just want to make sure that, first of all, you have goals, and that you show an interest in the relationship, and you are considerate of each other's time to make sure that, the whole mentorship is worthwhile. And, and this one's really important, because a lot of times people get stuck in a mentorship and they realize, oh no, this is not working, or this person's not right for me. So I think it's important to discuss those terms before you get into that relationship, where you can have like a comfort space to be like, hey, I don't think this is working. And you two can come to an understanding that, it's not working. So we might have to, find another mentor or find another mentee. And then just be grateful for the time that you have. You're going to have many mentors throughout your life, and some may come, some may go, some may be in your life for forever. So just be grateful for that time, and then return the favor someday. Just don't force it. Sometimes mentorships form out of relationships that you didn't even expect to happen. So just take advantage of it. If you see women like us and you just have a burning question, ask it. And most of us, I don't want to say all of us, but I think me and Laura would be pretty open to answering questions and, helping you to understand what it is in STEM that, we do and other women around us do.
That's a good answer. Laura, what do you believe would be the biggest challenge for the next generation of female leaders behind you, and what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is still the same challenge. I think it's not being afraid to go after what interests you and be concerned about what others think. You have to be true to yourself, your goals, and what you want. I think that's just human nature. I think sometimes a generation, because we all have gone through different aspects, because each generation is a little different, but I think it is also finding those people. I mean, you folks, you have computers, you have the phone. Oh my gosh, we didn't have all this stuff. When we see this and think, you have the world at your fingertips. Take advantage of these resources. They're there. And if you're not sure, reach out and ask somebody. What's the worst they can say? No. So you find somebody that says yes. And just don't be afraid to go after your dreams.
I like that answer. Altramese, what do you believe is the biggest challenge for the next generation of female leaders, and what advice would you give them?
So because I'm in sustainability, I always go back to that, because, we want to make sure that each generation leaves the world in a better place than what we came into. And so I think that is going to be one of the biggest challenges that the next generation of female leaders will have to endure, is creating sustainable solutions and trying to help climate change. And the only reason why I say that is because a lot of women are in the forefront of leading the way in that area. I believe eventually that at some point in time we will have gender equality, and I'm speaking specifically in the workplace as far as pay, promotions, women in the C-suite, women executives. And I feel from there, we maybe we'll focus more on social, environmental, and equity issues. We still have a long way to go, and it's going to take a lot of work. And so that's why, we circle back to saying how important it is to make sure that where me and Laura are now, that we reach back down to women younger than us to help prepare them, for the challenges that they're going to face moving forward, and make sure that they're ready. And I can tell you right now, I have a future female leader, and the next generation, they're going to be a deal to reckon with. So I'm waiting to see. I'm excited.
I like that you said, leave the world better than you found it. And I like that because, whenever we go camping, our troop leaders always say, let's leave the campsite better than we found it. Which I can relate to that a little bit. Laura, what inspirational message would you give young girls to inspire them to pursue STEM?
Well, I think part of that is, if they're interested, and don't be afraid, shine your light into the world is what I always say. Each of you are unique, and what interests you, you're the only person that can bring that forth. And we're going to need everybody. We need all the brain power we can get. So start mentoring those younger than you, and pursue that and into that, because I think it's in so many different fields. I just don't keep it just as this, because I see it everywhere. And I think Altramese even saying about the environment, and we're thinking about those things, it is everywhere. So I think it's bigger than what, just the small confines.
Yeah, I like that answer. Let your light shine, or yeah, I like that. Altramese, what inspirational messages would you give young girls to inspire them to pursue STEM?
So I'm going to circle back around to some virtual panels we did with a couple of schools, that young ladies that were your age. And the theme of the panel was Girls Rock STEM Too. And we have been doing that for a long time. If you look back in history, there have been many women who have been at the forefront of innovation and developing, new technologies, such as, I can't remember her name, but we wouldn't have Bluetooth and and be able to use our laptops and things like that today if it wouldn't have been for some of the work that she did in the past. So there's a lot of history. You can look up a lot of women who've done some great things in STEM and still are. I say throw all the stereotypes out the window. You have two living and breathing examples sitting right in front of you that it is possible, and don't let anybody tell you any different. You are smart enough. You are good enough. And if you know that, you will be, the title of this webinar series, Unstoppable. So like Laura said, just be yourself. And there's really not anything else you can be in life other than be yourself. And don't let anybody, stop you from doing that. So.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that. That's all the questions, and I don't think I have any questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. You did such a wonderful job. Ladies, is there anything else that you would like to share without our prompting? Any other things that you thought of that popped up in your heads without Katie's questions? Any last words?
Katie, you did an awesome job.
Thank you.
I think I would have been like hiding under the screen if I was your age. So thank you for being willing to do this, and you're already showing an example of a leader.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this for the Girl Scouts and for me and for...
Yes, thank you, Katie. I agree. She did a wonderful job.
Thank you
so much for being here, and thank you to all of our attendees for listening in. And we appreciate Katie and Altramese and Laura for being here. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their Tuesday.
Me too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.